Okay, now what you can do is you can stop the recording because it said recording in progress.
I see. Okay, welcome everyone. We're just so excited to be here, and we're so excited to have our special guest, Dr. Kathy Colmer, and we're going to do more of an introduction before very long. But I'd just like to start us out with our usual check-in, and what we do with our check-in is to just say the name that we would like to be called by and our preferred pronouns. And I'm taking just a point of privilege, I guess, on our icebreaker question, as I usually do. We've had just a ton of snow here in Taos today, and it was kind of a wet snow, so the streets are kind of melty. But so I'm going to ask if you like it. Well, if you like or don't like snow, what is your favorite or least favorite thing about snow? So I'll start. I'm Carol with she, her pronouns, and I like the whole idea that every snowflake is unique. Will you go next?
Okay. Give me.
Your name?
Mommy and Marco. I go here, bye.
Marco, he, him.
Oh,
And do you like snow?
give me. Give me.
You okay?
Yeah, I got it.
What do you like about snow? You stood by the window looking at it all morning.
Yeah, you.
Beautiful.
Okay. Kathy, could we trouble you to go next?
Carol, where did you say you are where it's snowing?
Taos, New Mexico.
Oh, okay. Well, it's funny. I have a lot to say about snow. Well, not really, but I grew up in Georgia where we didn't get much, and when it did snow, everything shut down. But since I've been married, we lived in Minnesota for a while. And the first year that we lived in Minnesota, over the Thanksgiving weekend, it snowed 21 inches. We moved there from Florida in August of that year. Then in November, it snowed 21 inches, and I never saw the ground again because all the snow that fell after that fell on top of it. I never saw the ground again until May. And because I am directionally challenged, I had to totally relearn my way around because the markers changed when the snow melted. And I can remember that same weekend when it did all that snow, and I was crying at the mall because I came out the door and I couldn't remember what door I had gone in, and I couldn't find anything for all the snow out there. So that's my story about snow. and although I did appreciate it when I was growing up, I am quite happy to never ever see snow again.
Craig, would you like to go next?
Me?
Yes.
My name is Craig. I'll answer to any pronoun at all. Just call me something. I'm originally from Wisconsin, so I grew up in the snow and on snowmobiles, and I loved it as a child. But as a person who now lives in Texas, it's just painful down here. The last snow we had was a very bitter pill in February of 2021, where the power grid went off and on, and over 200 and something people died in Texas because there was no power. There was nothing to run their oxygen and things that people need for days. It wasn't just So the last time I saw snow, it was a real bitter pill. So I have happy memories of snow as a child and then kind of bitter memories from Texas from 2 years ago, asking God no repeat this February. Amen.
Okay.
All right. Reverend Denise or Reverend Mona?
Yeah, I'll go next. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay, I'm finally plugged in the way that I want to in this hotel lobby. But I'm Reverend Denise Junius, and my pronouns are she, her. And like Craig, the last snow was very eventful. But I will tell you that we live in Sugar Land, and there was one year that Joanne and I decided to go to her parents' house in Conroe because we knew we were expecting snow. And so we went all the way to Conroe because it's a little more north, and we knew that we thought that it would snow more there and have a lot of fun. And so we wanted to be with family. And so it did snow that year, and it snowed in Sugar Land and did not snow in Conroe. And so our neighbors were texting and saying, we've got snow on our street, like, oh no. And so we just didn't get to experience it that year. But that's my story about snow. Haven't experienced it a whole lot in the, Houston area. But on occasion it has happened. So I'll pass it on to Mona, Reverend Mona.
So at all. Um, I well, I do remember having it as a kid because my mother was from Oklahoma, and so we would drive to Oklahoma and back. And there was one time that she slid on black ice and almost ran us into a ditch because of the ice. So that was my traumatic experience about snow. As a kid here in Houston, when it was snow, I made a snowman in the backyard. And then as an adult, I survived the blizzard in Philadelphia when it was up there one year when I went for a spiritual retreat. And it's pretty. I mean, it's pretty when you look out and you see all that snow all over the cars and the cars spinning and trying to get in a frozen car and cars not being able to go where they want to because they're slipping and sliding. I mean, it's pretty from a hotel room, but I freeze and I don't like cold. And even in Philadelphia, I froze my butt off over there because the heater didn't work in Philadelphia. And I told the person that I was with, because I was sleeping on the sofa and she was sleeping in the bed. And I said, if this heater doesn't work tonight, I'm sleeping with you. Whether she wanted it or not, I'm sleeping with you because I'm cold and I'm over it. And then getting on the plane from Philadelphia, sliding on the ice to get to the airport in a van. I just knew I was going to die. I just knew I was going to die. And then when they had to defrost the plane, the wings of the plane, I just thought, get me back to Texas, just get me back to Texas. I couldn't wait. And then when the plane tried to pull out, you could hear the wheels spinning. They had to go get a tow truck to pull the plane out. And I just thought, just get me back to Texas. Just get me back to Texas. And so I'm not a real fan of snow at all. So I'll keep myself in Texas, and that's where I'll stay. So that's my story.
Nice. Before we go on, I want to ask Reverend Denise why you're in a hotel lobby and where you are.
So I'm still in Sugar Land, and we are having some home renovations, and so and it's over the entire house, changing out floors and countertops and building new cabinets and all that kind of great stuff. And so we've been here for to tomorrow makes 2 weeks, and so I look forward to Saturday being able to move back into the house.
Can we see the reveal on our next Zoom? I love HGTV when they do the reveal.
Yeah, yeah. I've shared a few before pictures and after pictures, you know, the work in progress with Reverend Mona. And so she'll be one to, you know, she's been kind of going this journey with me and trying to keep me sane in the process.
Well, my name is Alex and I go by she, they. And I had never seen snow until 2020 that I went to Denver. And I was amazed. I loved it. I was there probably like 2 or 3 days. I say I would be okay with it if it was on a daily basis, but I've never lived where there's a lot of snow. So we'll see once I live somewhere with snow, but it's beautiful. I can't believe that there's different parts of, you know, the US that there's places that it never snows, and then there's other places that you have a whole bunch of snow that you can't even walk. But it's beautiful.
Wonderful. Alex, would you give us a little more detailed introduction of our wonderful guest?
Of course. I am so happy and excited, and just you guys are in for a treat. Just letting you guys know now. We have Kathy Comer, who is an author, a Christian educator, a professional storyteller, speaker, teacher, and retreat leader. She is a graduate of Spelman College, the University of South Florida, and United Theological Seminary with a Doctor of Ministry in Biblical Storytelling. Kathy is the editor of a collection of personal narratives called Yes, Jesus Loves Me, 31 Love Stories, and On the Wings of Prayer, Daily Prayers, Thoughts, and Meditations to Lift Your Spirits. And that's the book that Carol is holding up now. She is the author of the 2020 story series for the Episcopal Diocese of Texas, Moving Forward in Truth, the African American experience of Episcopalians in the Diocese of Texas. So let's give a round of applause to Kathy.
Thank you, Alex. That was a mouthful.
Well, those are a lot of accomplishments. So I'm just going to kind of bring us from where we were last week. We discussed, we had just had a lovely discussion about interpersonal communication. And so just from your book, which has daily prayers, thoughts, and meditations, how would you say that prayer is alike or different from human to human communication?
That was that big old question. I'm just thinking when we have human to human interaction, for me, there is consideration for what the response might be. There is consideration for the words, my word choices, my intonations, all of those things. When for me, it's going before God is kind of an unedited experience. You can put it out there in the raw. You can put it out there without the fear that of retaliation, or the fear of rejection, or the fear of misunderstanding. And it to me, it's more of a heart-to-heart communication than heart to ear, or whatever else it might be. But for me, that's the biggest thing. And I feel like I can, people talk about going in my prayer closet or whatever your designated space is or place. just talking to God, which can simply be undesignated space wherever you are, but it can be impromptu, it can be whatever. It is just really a calling out to God and just sharing what is on heart, mind, soul, and going before God with that. So I'd love to hear what somebody else has to say, but that's just for me personally.
Well, I'm just going to kind of ask a little bit more about that same thing. Some of the entries in your book are written as prayers to God and others as messages from God. In our first session, we discussed how some of us hear God speaking, and somebody may want to add on to that question as well. How do you hear God speak?
And I am not one of those folk who says I can hear God audibly speaking to me. And again, it is more of a heart-to-heart communication. When the pieces that I've written in there come out of the quiet oftentimes, or in response to something that is going on in life, some event that occurred, and it may not have even been for me personally. But and this part is hard for me because it's so abstract to say how I hear from God, and then it might not work next time. But it is trying. So what I try to do is really just position myself in a place where I can receive. And I wish I could hear that voice. And I have asked for that voice to hear it sometimes. And sometimes there is the uncertainty of it, but I have come to a place in my life where I'm not afraid to go back and say, did I get that right? Did I hear that right? Did I misunderstand that? And I am very careful also to ask God to not allow me to speak out of turn. And for me, that's something that has taken me a long time to get to that place. But I am so careful about not misspeaking for God. There is a scripture that says, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray, then they would hear from here, blah, 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 blah. This in one of those Chronicles. And I say, and it came to, and really and truly, it literally just came to me, that God said, if my people who are called by my name will stop calling me out of my name, misspelling my name, mispronouncing my name, saying the wrong thing in my name, then more people might want to be called by my name. You know, and I'm very careful about that. I try, and again, I misspeak. I misspeak sometime as well, but I try to did I get that right? You know, did I hear you right, Lord? Is that really what you're saying? And it is really more of an experience of the word than it is a hearing of the word, if that makes sense at all.
So I'd like to ask a question. As an author, what motivated a book about prayer? Was there something you wanted to accomplish with this book? And that's two different questions. So the first question is, what motivated this book? And then what was your impetus, or the thing that you wanted to accomplish as a result of this book?
Funny you should ask that, Reverend Denise, because it's such a human response I have to that. I actually started writing these. So what's in the book, this may be the 2 or 3 iterations of what it started out being. But back in the days, this is the truth. I got on Facebook so I could see what my children were posting, my grown children. Well, they call me a troll back, a Facebook troll back in those days. But one of my colleagues from the biblical storytelling community posted something one day, because I didn't post anything. I would just look at what other people posted that I knew. And he posted something one day that said, I have a friend, and it wasn't even the main point of his posting. He just said, I have a friend who writes a prayer daily or posts a prayer daily. And I literally sat back in my chair and said, I wonder if I can post a prayer daily. Literally. And I wrote my first prayer that day. And then it became a challenge to me after that. Can I really do this every day? And that's how it began. And that was 12 years ago. No, let me see. Wait a minute, I might be wrong. 2012, how many years ago was 2012? Whatever 2012 to now is. It was that many years ago. And then there were some days I didn't have anything at all. And so now some days it may be a new prayer or a new thought or a new meditation or reflection, or some days it may be me revisiting something that was written in the past. And now sometimes I just go before God and say, God, is there anything that you want me to share? And I call them early on, I call them prayers to share. And that was what I said, they were prayers to share because they weren't. And I have a friend who in my hometown in Georgia, and she would always say, you need to stop putting that on Facebook. You need to stop giving but it was not for me. And they are words that I can go back now sometimes and read them fresh and new, as though they are now speaking to me. So I see them as an opportunity to share something for someone else, but at the same time, to me, in the way that God operates, God doesn't give anything to us just for ourselves. And so it becomes a thing that can bless us almost as it is passing through to bless somebody else. And it may or may not be simultaneously. So if that answers that.
Yeah, and the second part of that question was once you put the book together, and collected all the prayers together, what was the thing that you had hoped to accomplish by actually publishing a book of prayers?
There were people that I would meet along the way, because you never really know who's reading your stuff when you put it out there. And back in the older days, people would use the share button on there. And if they would use the share button, I would see it. But I discovered that more people were using it than were using the share button. They were cutting and pasting it. And I was going places and people would say, oh, I see your stuff and I do such and such with it. And it does this for me, or I use it in this way, and so forth. And so it became a thing for me that perhaps the folk in my little circle of folk who were my Facebook friends, maybe there was some benefit beyond that. Maybe it was something that someone could use beyond that. And that was really what, first of all, believing enough in what I had as an offering that it could make a difference. Then being courageous enough to do, because it literally took me 5 years to get that in a book. And there were all, and even now with this version of it, even after I got it published last year, then I had some issues with the publisher on that. And I say, and I just got, this was kind of my thing with God. If there's really some struggle in it, you say, okay, Lord, you got a reason for me to do this, because I listened to one of your a piece of one of your previous sessions, Reverend Denise, and you said you don't use, well, you said the word you don't use, and you use adversary instead of that. And that's a choice of word I prefer too, is to use the adversary. And sometimes when the struggle is so great, I feel that the adversary is trying to stay in the way, get in the way of the task doing what it was intended to do. And that was where I came to in this process, is that with the struggle, well, that is, I did throw up my hands at one time and say, I might be done with this. Then when I came to my senses, then I changed and said there must be some value to it, and I'm going to be faithful to what I feel is a call for me to do, a task that I've been called to. And I don't say that lightly, because I don't just as often as I don't say God told me, I'm careful about saying what God instructed me to do. I seek God and I trust that that is what I am being led to do. But I always have that little margin of error, and it doesn't stop me, but it's just kind of there in the event that I didn't hear it right.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Alex, I think that might be related to a question that you had.
Yes, so for me, in thinking the daily meditations and the daily prayers, when the importance of them. You know, earlier before we started recording, you mentioned how I just lost it. Oh, it'll come back. But I associated that with you saying how we all listen to God differently and in our own way.
Right.
So in having that daily prayer, and that, do you think that that helps lead us to being able to hear and speak with God in our own personal, unique way and have that unique bond with God?
You know, Alex, I can't say that it will, but that would be my best hope, is that it would, that you would read something that would send you on your own journey to find God, to seek God for the answers for yourself, because people answer a lot of times out of their own experience and their limited understanding. And at best, is to take, as I said, even if you take it as, well, I just don't agree with this, and I'm going to go and search for myself. If it sent you there, even to prove somebody wrong, and you found a truth or you found an answer for yourself that was useful to you in your own life, it was worth it. It is not to say that everything that Kathy has said is an answer. And I hope that, again, it just stirs up the pot. It just stirs up the pot.
Yes, so you mentioned that your hope is that this has people thinking, and it creates that own question, like their own
Yes.
questioning, to then lead them to go find the answer.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I love that is kind of like that spark
Yes.
that ignites you, and it also deepens that bond on
Yes.
your own faith, but also that bond with whoever you're having this discussion with.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that answer, Alex. That's why I love the conversation. This is Kathy's personal thought. I don't believe that God ever intended for us to find all of the answers in isolation, but in coming together and being open to listening to, because each of us brings a different perspective. And somewhere I believe in that we can find the truth. The difference is when we begin to put up barriers and we say and shut people out, and I'm not listening to them. And I'm guilty of that too, because right now there's some rhetoric that I hear that I can't accept. I can't believe, but it is after having wrestled with some things on my own and having come to terms with some things on my own. So.
Well, speaking of what you've wrestled with, what we've this whole class is about discussing how theology, the way that we think and talk about God, affects everything in our lives.
Yes. yes.
So, could you say a little bit about, has the way that you envisioned God changed over the years,
Mhm.
and how did that affect you and your?
I will say that I have definitely become more open to let's see, I don't know how to say that, but I did grow up in a, I grew up in a Baptist church, and I don't know that it was the denomination as much as it was just the church that I grew up in. There was a lot of, you believe what we tell you to believe, maybe. And then I became an Episcopalian reluctantly because I was familiar with what I was familiar with. But my husband had grown up in the Episcopal church, and I wanted us to worship together as a family, and I was the only one that was going to make a change. So I made a change. I went kicking and screaming, but I went. And at this point in my life, I can really say, and I'm talking about kicking and screaming for a lot of years, y'all. For a lot of years. But I will say that I am awfully grateful for the experience. I will say, going from the Baptist church to the Episcopal church, but also in my introduction to the biblical storytelling community, which I say is an ecumenical community where people come from different faith traditions, Christian traditions, because we are Bible based. We are telling the stories of God, but there is something about allowing you to think about what you believe and allowing you to hear the stories, hear the scriptures for yourself. Something about the process of reading scripture for the purpose of allowing it to go inside of you. I know this sounds really vague and abstract and all of that, but there is an openness that I feel that I have come to experience over the years. And there are some things that there's an expression. This doesn't have anything to do with faith necessarily, but there's this little poster thing that I had that says, "Be open to the possibility of things being way better than you imagined." And I sort of feel that way about my understanding of God. Be open to God being more than you expected, or different from what you expected, or nothing like what you expected, and seek God for yourself. And I guess that's the greatest gift that I have had, is that I've been on this journey of seeking God for myself, going from where I thought I had to do everything in a prescribed manner, believe everything in a prescribed way, respond in a particular way. And I'm still growing in that. And I just believe that faith is a lifelong journey. I truly believe that it's a lifelong journey. And I don't think it's linear. I think it's circular. I think it's convoluted. I think we may go here and come back. We may fall off the wagon, and sometimes we feel ourselves lifted up again. And I just feel that if we will allow ourselves to go on that journey, but with a heart truly to seek the truth and to know God, I think we'll discover some things about God that we never knew or never imagined.
I love that.
Oh.
Not putting God in just a small box and making God fit into that box,
Yeah,
because God is
yeah.
much greater than that.
Yes.
And would you say that your understanding of God and how God is much greater than what we
Yes.
made God out to be,
Yes.
that changed or influenced how you interact with other people? in the amount of grace that you have for others?
I absolutely believe that, because when you can move beyond the notion that God is judge and judge only. And let me tell you how, let me give you an example of how this came to my mind. I'll share this, an example of how I shifted a little bit in my thinking. I am a member of the Episcopal Church, and we do readings. We read scripture during church and all that. We read like a lot of scripture in church. Some people read it rote, whatever. Anyway, and this is after I started learning and telling scripture, and you don't even have to learn it and tell it. You can just interact with scripture in a deeper way than simply reading it and kind of reflecting on it, but making personal connections. Anyway, I was in church one Sunday, and the lady was reading the story of Genesis 3, where the first couple, God puts them in the garden, gives them two trees. They got two trees in the garden, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God gives them one restriction. Don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He didn't say don't, God, well, and forgive me with my use of pronouns. I'm an English teacher, and for me, we taught the male pronoun or the masculine pronoun more of a generic term. And so when I use it, I'm often using it generically speaking. However, God did not tell the couple not to eat from the tree of life and live forever. So anyway, this lady was reading the scripture that day, and she was reading it in typical fashion that people read that. God is mad at them because they didn't follow what God's instructions. And God is punishing them. God is putting them out of the garden. They got to get out now. And she was, the lady who was reading it so harshly. And it, for the first, I heard it completely differently than I had heard it, because I'd often heard people read that scripture that way because they figured God is mad. But God says, after the couple has been sent from the garden, there's this conversation that God is speaking, and God says the way is barred for them not to get back into the garden. Okay, y'all still with me, because this is my long drawn out explanation.
We're still with you.
Okay, thank you. So God says we can't let them back in here for fear that they will eat of the tree of life and live forever. Now, God said nothing about that tree of life and living forever prior to their disobedience, only after they had disobeyed. And honestly, this understanding came over me that God was saying, not that y'all get out of here because I'm mad at you and you're not going to have paradise anymore. But God says, I cannot let you live in this broken state forever. So I have to get you out of here before you do something that can't be reversed. And so the rest of the story is about God reconciling humanity to God's self, rather than God just saying, you can't be in here because you didn't do what I told you to do. And that's the kind of openness that I feel, a place that I have come to at least entertain the notion that may be God showing me something about God's self, if that makes sense, or if it doesn't. But that's a kind of openness that I didn't necessarily have before. I was probably very much like the lady I heard reading it. God was mad at them. God was putting them out, and they ain't gonna get back in here. But that is not what God says, because you know what? You know when that tree of life shows up again? In Revelation. The tree of life is there again. And now, because of the work of Christ, of Jesus, we are able to partake of that tree of life and live forever. but only reconciliation, that work had to take place first before you could go back. That same garden is there at the end that was there in Genesis. Y'all read it.
I love the way you
Well-
circled it around.
Yeah, you know, it anyway, that's what I'm saying. Just being open to it being far greater, far better, far more inclusive, far more than we ever imagined or hoped for. We're all in the story. Y'all know that. Well, I heard that the first time I went to a biblical storytelling gathering, the keynoter there said, there is but one story, it's God's stories. The rest of us are in it. Some people would have us believe that we're not. But
What I heard, not so much, I mean, I understood your understanding of being a disciplinary God, saying you disobeyed me, so now you have to get out. So I'm being the disciplinarian, so you have to leave now because I'm punishing you, type of appearance. What I heard also in the second part of that was God feared. I heard fear. We can't let them because they'll live forever. There was a fear.
in a broken state, though, not that they would live forever, period, but in a broken state, because God's plan was always to have God's people in paradise. Paradise was created for humanity.
At the same time, we always say there's only two emotions. There's either love or there's fear. We see the love of God in what God has given, not
Yeah.
only in creation, but in the giving of his son. But we never talk about the fear of God fearing. And this is a prime example of where there's a first insight into God fearing.
Interesting. And I think that just brings about so many ideas of what happens when we open ourselves up to new ideas, new perspectives, and just learning from each other in a situation like this is pretty amazing. I've thought before about how storytelling is just so crucial for marginalized communities. And this part where you did the story series for the Episcopal Diocese of Texas, how was that received? Did it?
That was done. That was a project for 2020 COVID year. One thing I would say about the Episcopal Church, they keep very good records. So, well, excuse me, I don't mean, let me retract that. They keep records. All of them ain't that good, but they got records. And the Episcopal Church has an annual meeting, and the structure for the church is pretty much unchanged from the beginning. So there were records of this annual meeting that went back to prior to emancipation. So to use these, I was able to use some of these records to come up with some of these stories. And they, at least in some cases, they just kind of gave me the spark for going and researching elsewhere to find the stories. I will say there may have been some negative response to it. I didn't hear those. The ones who wanted to explore more, some of them reached out to me and invited me and gave me opportunities to come and just share some of what I had learned. Again, but I applaud them for even considering it, allowing some of those stories to be told, because they actually go back to the point where the bishop would go to plantation, and they would write records of how many of the how slave children were baptized or whatever, or marriages, whatever task the clergy person performed, they'd have a record of it. It took me a while to realize it was probably his plantation. I didn't really get it at first. They were probably the slaves on his plantation. But again, and there may be some further work done with that, but they were open to at least hearing some of those stories and taking an honest look at themselves in some ways, but not all received it that way. Yeah. So. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I guess I'm just thinking about how storytelling can help us. Yeah, so that's kind of an incomplete thought.
And it does, it certainly has that potential when we, facts you can argue, but experience is experience. We argue the truth of whatever positions we hold, but I grew up where I grew up, in the town where I grew up, under the circumstances that I grew up. Now I'm going to tell it from my vantage, but that's the experience. And that's the thing about biblical storytelling too, is the recognition and the acknowledgement that a lot of those stories were initially told before they were written down. They were told. And what I'd like to say is, unless Moses was there at creation, somebody had to tell Moses those stories. So they were traditioned down, and they're very much like in other storytelling that I do. I tell a lot of folk tales, or have told a lot of folk tales, and they were basically told the same way. They were told verbally as people traveled about. They shared those stories. In the faith community, those stories were traditioned down, passed down as were family stories, but they were the stories of God that were told. And the Bible itself is this collection of stories of God's interaction with people. We've kind of made it this big mysterious thing. To me, when people do that, it's always to limit access or to control access to it. When you make it, something that you have to be some special in some kind of way in order to have access to it or understand it.
Yeah, that makes me think about, then in this day and time, it's people's temptation to negate other people's stories.
Yes.
So how can we use storytelling today to help bring more unity, and we're in the season of hope, we're in the season of peace, we're in the season of joy. How can we use storytelling to support us, and where there's less friction and tension and more coming together in a human way?
There's a project. I used to work for the Episcopal Diocese, and it was a project that we did, but it was borrowed from Interfaith Ministries. And Interfaith Ministries has, I don't know whether they still do it or not, but they used to call them Amazing Faith Dinners. I don't know whether anybody is familiar with that or not. But with these Amazing Faith Dinners, they would invite, and it was intentional. There were people from all faith traditions: Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, atheists, agnostics, Christians, and people would sign up for these dinners, and then through whatever process they used, they would be hosted in people's homes, and they would set it up such that you had a mixture of these faith traditions there together. And they used a set of cards that had questions that inspired a story response. We duplicated that in the Episcopal Diocese, just we called ours sharing faith dinners. But it was a facilitated conversation. It was not open to just saying anything, but it was very strict. They were very strict in the guidelines that when a person was talking, you could not, there was no crosstalk, but the person was given the opportunity to respond, and there was no rebuttal when they were done with the story. You moved on in the next, and you would sit around the table. There was a meal involved, but you pull a card from this deck of cards and you would answer this question, whatever card it was that you pulled. And what it did was force people, and that's a harsh word, but I can't think of another word right now, to listen to people's stories without interrupting, without formulating your response to. And I really love the concept behind that is us simply getting together, sharing what is our truth with now at the end, you could ask clarifying questions, but not during the sharing time, but at the end of the evening. So if in your sharing of your story, you said something and I really didn't understand it, then at the end of our discussion, after everyone has shared, because the idea is to have everyone share his or her story. And then I could say, well, Reverend Denise, you said such and such when you were telling your story. Can you explain that? I didn't understand, or whatever it is at that time. But I don't know what the answer to it is, but I know that it has to be, it almost has to work like that with some guidelines in place so that we can, because now we're so conditioned to answering what we think you meant, or to responding to you, creating our rebuttal before you can even get your story out. And so it has to be very intentional. And I don't know, it may be like, what was that? United Negro College Fund had as its motto, 1 year, each one reach one. I don't know, but it's certainly worth exploring, because I am convinced that when we listen to one another's stories, we will find that we are far more alike. We are all concerned about the same major issues in life. And those things, we need the health of our bodies, our families, being loved, doing good, whatever these common factors are, these things we hold in common. But we don't want to hear the stories. And so now there are more and more efforts to just shut it down so you don't have to tell it. Don't bring that book into this classroom. We don't want to hear whatever it is. So it may have to be in gatherings such as this. Thinking again outside the box. What did you say earlier, Alex? We don't put God in a box, but we put each other in boxes too.
Yeah, we sure do. And I think it's when we talk about things that make people uncomfortable, it triggers that little question within them. What part did I play in this? Those things that you don't want to think about. What part did my family play in this? How was my family affected by this? How did my family benefit from this? And I think when people get into that arena, they hurry up and put us in boxes of, no, that's not the truth, or no, let's not talk about that. And I mean, we're doing it with our faith, we're doing it with the stories of different cultures, different nationalities, where they're like, no, if it doesn't fit in the box, it's not talked about.
Yep. Coming out stories.
Dr. Kathy, I need to get going, but it's I wake up at 4 in the morning to go to work, and so I'm just beat. And And not only that, I'm covering for my boss this week. She's on vacation.
Uh-huh.
But I certainly have enjoyed listening to you speak this evening. And I just thank you for coming to this meeting. And like, having the conversation is always the place to start. And I just thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And good night to my other beloveds here. I'm from Austin, Texas, by the way. So I'm not sure where you're at. Where are you at,
Oh,
Dr.
here in
Kathy?
Houston. I'm here in
Oh, you're in
Houston.
Houston?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I will see you all next week, and y'all have a great evening.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Craig.
Bye, yay.
I'm enjoying and circling back to what you had said earlier about reframing. It made me think about reframing our mindset about the way that we think about God. And that initial story in Genesis, that God took us out of the garden, and not necessarily as a punishment, but to keep our best interest in mind, and not having us live a life full of pain.
An act of grace. An act of
Yes.
grace.
Yes.
Mhm.
And thinking of us in a different way, and again reframing our mindset and being open that God
Yes.
maybe is not a punishing God. God is just
Mhm.
trying to be there for us despite of our actions.
It reminds me of, see, y'all wouldn't know that anything about this, but when I was growing up, yeah, I got some little butt spankings. And the saying was, this is gonna hurt me more than it's gonna hurt you. But when I had children of my own, I could understand that concept, that it is not my desire to punish you. It is not my desire to do things to cause you harm, but it is my desire to do the best that I know how and I'm equipped to do in this moment to ensure that something even worse does not happen for you down the road. And it takes some years of living to come to that place as well, to understand that some people really do mean that. Everybody doesn't, but some people really do mean that. Yeah.
And in having these conversations that are difficult, if we think that we're sharing those stories to punish someone, that's not the truth. We're not trying to share these stories that are trying to be buried to punish anyone. We're just trying to share it so it doesn't continue to happen. And instead of thinking, oh, there's this person sharing what happened years and years ago, and it's not happening anymore, they're trying to punish us for something that we had no part in. But the reality, like, don't think of it of us trying to punish you for something or making you feel bad about something. It's just the story, our truth, in a sense, our experience, our perception, and just be open to that, and don't think of it as us trying to punish you for something.
Bye.
Sometimes maybe sharing, maybe there's other purposes for sharing a story too. And just sometimes it's so good to just release and just have somebody hear our experience. It can be a way of connecting, and just it can be very healing just for the person who's telling the story. Yeah.
That sense of acknowledgement, acknowledging that this is the experience that was occurring. And just saying, you know what, I'm listening to what you're saying, and validating that.
Yes.
This makes me think about how Brene Brown talks about the stories we tell ourselves. And as you're talking, Alex, I'm thinking about how sometimes in the retelling of the story, how we experience the story even differently when we look back on it, back on those experiences. And so I can see people taking the biblical story that they may have learned as a child, or and particularly even with my seminary experience, when you look back on those stories, we experience it in a very different way because we are more knowledgeable or more informed, or are just in a totally different place.
Yes, absolutely.
One aspect of the title of this group discussion that we is self-love. Conversations about faith, society, and self-love, and we haven't talked as much about that so far, and that's a really just those. I like that what you said about the stories we tell ourselves, both about God and but just also about ourselves. It's so easy to get into that negative self-talk. Sometimes it's just, I'm so stupid. Oh God, why did I do that? And if we can be more compassionate with ourselves in the stories, hey, this is where I was, that wow, I came through this in in a really powerful way, or something like that, instead of saying, I'm just trying to think of a better example, but self-talk. And I never thought of that in terms of storytelling, but I think that's a really powerful.
And you know what, Carol, I don't know, I was just thinking as you were saying that sometimes we we are, well, I don't know whether we fail to begin at that place of telling ourselves the stories that we need to hear. Yes. And that we need to tell. We're oftentimes trying to, for myself, and I'm speaking for myself personally, because of some challenges I had in my childhood and growing up, it was always so important to me that somebody else validate me. And it was always about telling the story or being the image that I thought would be acceptable to someone else. But the truth of that is the real healing comes when we can begin to tell ourselves the truth about who we are, when we can tell ourselves those stories, when we can find the validation that we seek in that relationship with self and in our personal relationship with God. And it's sort of, I don't know, I just wonder if it doesn't remove some of that urgency, I guess, if I'm saying that right, to make you accept my story or believe my story or listen to my story, because I do know my truth. And that's another thing I've had to, because of some issues, parental issues and stuff. Well, a lot of those folk are gone. Those are things I'm going to have to be reconciled with. And some of it is looking at some of the messes that I made as a result of that. But now being able to look in that mirror and tell me that story and say, you got a ways to go, but you ain't where you were, and recognizing that we're all struggling with something or another. We are all struggling with something or another. And part of the journey of this lifetime is coming to terms with that and being okay with who we are. Yeah.
Wow.
It's like we ourselves are our own daily prayer. When we look at ourselves are in ourselves a daily prayer.
Yeah.
We are something that we can look back on 2 years from now, a year from now, a week from now, and realize that that person that we were,
Yes.
we're no longer that person. We've changed and morphed, and we're able to see ourselves in a different light.
Yes. And to recognize that out of all of the possibilities, God decided for each of us that each of us was worth it. There was not, the going to the cross wasn't for a select few, but each one was worth it, you know? And again, part of that journey is coming to recognize that we are. And that's not an easy thing to say. I mean, you know, the words fall out, but that's not an easy place to come to. For us, some of us, there's a greater struggle than others, but recognizing that if you believe in this God, that God is omnipotent, that God is all-knowing, that God is the creator of all, and that God did not make mistakes. Our journeys don't look the same. Our journeys are different. The coming to the places that we need to come to in life, we get there by different means. But at the same time, God said, this one is worth it. I said this, you know, I have said this on a number of occasions to people who, you know, my daughter in one case, but to each life that each person that enters this world, God said yes to. Think about all the children that are never born, but each one that enters, God said, yep.
Powerful.
Did we talk yet about people who struggle with how to pray and how to connect with God? Did we talk yet about that?
We have not.
Is something about it just opening up when we first started. You talked some about just opening up to the idea of hearing the story in a different way. And I know sometimes, well, like the other day, I was having just a bad day, and I was angry. I was just angry at the whole world. I was just like, why is this way? You know, and the more that I thought about why I was angry, then the angrier I got. But I just kind of picked up my journal, and I was kind of I was telling God why I was so angry. But once I kind of opened it up, I was just like, God, can't I have some peace or something? And once I just said, God, where are you in this? Once I just consciously had that bringing God into it. I mean, God was always there, but I'm just like, can't I see you? And one of the things that I do when I'm anxious or upset is, you know, I look at my phone, I doom scroll, I, you know, look at Facebook, and sure enough, I mean, one of the first things that popped up was like this, one of those "you are loved" kind of images, and I was just like, thank you. Thank you. Like even my bad habit of getting on my phone, God used that to send me a little hug.
Yes. Give you, I like that, gives a little hug, a little wink, a little hug. To just remind you that God is all around and everywhere. I love what you said, Carol, really, because sometimes that is just a way to that journaling. Everybody doesn't like to write or put it down, but sometimes you just just write it all out. And that's the thing about it. God is a big old God. God is not offended. You know, we think that we can say something to offend God, or, God is gonna hurt God's feelings or whatever. But that honest, open communication. And sometimes when you just keep on writing and writing and writing, it sounds like you had that experience too. You find the answer in your writing. And sometimes you may circle back around just by simply getting it all out. I don't know why we think that packing it down, keeping it inside somehow makes us a little more holy because we didn't let it out. I mean, I didn't say it out loud. I could make you a crude reference, but anything you hold in too long and don't let it out could create blockage.
That's good. I don't know if we answered Reverend
I don't know,
Denise.
Reverend Denise, what do you say about that? I really would love to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I just think that some people do struggle, particularly in this day and age when the messages are complex, incomplete, and distorted, when it comes to a loving, caring God. And so there are times in people's lives when they struggle to be able to make that connection. And so what I was wondering is, how do we support, or what do we recommend for people just trying to start off that journey, to even petitioning God or in praying. And we can't assume that people have the knowledge of what a prayer is, but they, there are times, particularly in the struggle, as you mentioned, Carol, struggling with anger or anxiety or whatever it is, there's this outreach for help. And so what we look at that is that the outreach is to a loving God. So how do we help people to connect to God in that sense, or to in a way that how do you promote the idea of prayer as a possible solution, particularly in the struggle?
A good question.
And then teach people how to pray. We assume that everybody knows how to pray, but not everybody really know how to pray. I've had to answer that question in my dealings with people. I've had to help answer that question. So I just want to put it out there to see what you all think.
I'm thinking about a sketchbook when you say that. And sitting down for me, and if I didn't know where to start, I think being asked, well, what do you want God to represent? Who do you want God to be to you? What is God for you? If you were asked, I want you to write down who God is to you, in a sense of, if you needed that support system that's not physical, who would that be to you? And, like, is it someone that's going to be kind to you, even though they're not right next to you? Is it that kind voice that you're not allowing yourself to to speak out? Like, it's okay for that, for God, for you to be that kind voice. I don't know if that would help, like, I think our image, as Kathy was saying, and you, Reverend Denise, is that the story has been distorted so much that a lot of people that don't want to lean into God is because of that negative image that they've been given or heard of from many, many people. So why can't we start from scratch individually? And then we can go and find who God is for ourselves without that tainted image from others.
Mm. I like that idea of the sketch pad, and that could be that for the artist, that is a starting point. For the journalist, that is a starting point. For the dancer, movement is a place, because there is something, I guess for me, and again, this is not a direct answer to that, but God always begins with spirit to me, as in the beginning. The Spirit of God was hovering above the waters. So our first connection with God is by spirit. So it is not a tangible experience. And it is in this way. And again, this is one of those really vague things for me. That's why I kind of just get, yeah, my sessions are in the bathroom in the morning. I'm just, that's just my space. And going into that space and seeking if there is something for me. But I begin because I begin talking, and it's a conversation that I have with God, and I am grateful for the day. Gratitude is a good starting place. I am grateful to take a breath, to open my eyes and see a new day. I am grateful for whatever possibility awaits me today. There's an expression I heard someone use, and I use it periodically, that says, it's a new day and I get to be in it. And I'm grateful for that. And I start in that place of gratitude, and then my thoughts and my conversation go in different places with that. It's, what am I looking forward to today? What power do I need outside of myself to help me approach this day? What is it that I'm grateful for? What is it that I'm in need of? Who else can I bless? What else can I do to make a difference in someone else's life? All of these, beginning to ask all of these questions, or to respond in my own way to the questions that come up in my spirit. And that's what, even it doesn't have to be this big grand thing in the beginning, but beginning in one place, even if it is that place of gratitude, or even if it is that place of questioning, or if it is that place of restlessness. I get, some days I say, and I wrote a piece, I don't know whether it's in here or not, but because my friend told me I have several more books of these that haven't come out yet, from what because I've continued to write them, is that, some days before I open my eyes, the prayer begins. Before I even open my eyes, this morning was one of those mornings, and I was thinking about my children, and it went from being, I just want to make sure that you take care of them, that you lead them, that you guide them, that they have their needs met. And then it may be me and my needs, and then it may be what I can offer someone else. Whatever these things that we wonder about, whatever these things that concern us, whatever the things we're grateful for, every aspect of our lives, we can just offer it up, in that conversation. At its basic level, it is a conversation. We think conversation always has to be us speaking. Sometimes it is us listening. Sometimes it is us expressing ourselves through movement, through motion. Sometimes it is us expressing. Who do you think the master artist was? If God is creator of the universe, who do you think the first artist was? Hey. Sometimes we think we created stuff. I said, people who think that God doesn't ever tell a joke or laugh or anything, did they think we created humor? Or was humor a gift to us from God? Because God knew the value of humor, the value of laughter. So anyway.
You're muted, Denise.
I can certainly appreciate what you said about the different ways prayers are actually formulated. It's not always a conversation.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is a movement.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it is a piece of art.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a friend in quotation marks colleague who is an artist, and he works at another Episcopal church. He has a beautiful little book. I wish I had it with me. It's called Sparrow's Song, and it's all about prayer. And the little sparrow, it's written as a children's book, but as is often the case, there is an adult message or message beyond just children's comprehension, where Sparrow can't figure out how to pray. and Sparrow goes, and every time Sparrow meets another animal along the way, he's asking for this prayer, and the animal responds in the way that it responds in giving that might be a book you want to look at, Sparrow's Prayer. I think that's the right name for that book. But it talks about different ways, you know, it just gives us the opportunity to think about it differently.
That's beautiful. And I think as we're getting near to the end of our time tonight, maybe we could wrap it up with a with a prayer. And I wonder if you would like to lead us in that, Kathy.
Oh, and one of these?
That would be wonderful.
Ah, okay. Well, since the book fell open to this page, number 77, I'll leave you with this. Breath of God, fill me up anew. Holy breath, fill me through and through. Let me your presence feel in the quiet and the still. Let deep speak to deep, as you will, my soul to keep and longing to fulfill. Breath of God, holy breath, fill me up anew. Refresh, revive, renew. Stir me up as only you can do. Breath of God, life-giving breath, holy breath. Fill your servant till there's no room for more, except I pour. Amen.
Wow.
Thank you all for having me.
That
Thank
was
you so much.
such a beautiful prayer.
Yes.
I look forward to our devotion series that I hope you don't mind if I announce that Alex will be leading us through that year-long devotion online.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. You're going to have to share with me, Alex. Tell me sometimes what people are saying, how they are responding, how it's going. So please do that.
Of course, of course. And it was a pleasure to meet you and hear what you have to say. And I'm honored to be a
Thank
part of that and being along with the process of others finding their own questions and answering their own questions
Great.
through your
Thank you.
work. So thank you.
Thank you.
My book.
And you're more than welcome to join us. We have, I believe, 1 or 2 more sessions online.
Okay.
It's on Thursdays. We start at 6. So you're
Mhm.
more than welcome to join us. It'll be through the same link I
Okay.
loved you shared, and you're more than welcome to join
Thank you.
us in the conversation.
Thank you. Thank
It
you.
actually starts at 6:30.
6:30. There you
Yeah.
go.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm one of those people where it was helpful to tell me early.
Ma'am. and
Blessings to you all.
What is
And-
Marco saying there?
You get my book.
You're what?
My book.
Look.
You're good in my book? Is that what
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Marco. I appreciate that.
Oh, okay. Hey, you got Molly. You like again.
This was absolutely wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and inviting me. And we'll see you later.
Okay.
Yes.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.
You take care. Bye-bye.
You take care too.
Bye.
Bye, Marco.